Um, Great. Hello. So welcome, folks. My name is Leigh Rondon-Davis. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I'm the Associate Artistic Director here at Shotgun Players. Before we get started, I want to kick things off with our land acknowledgement. In the spirit of humility and respect, we request that you join us in acknowledging that the land beneath Shotgun's theater and studios and throughout the East Bay is Huichin, the traditional unceded land of the Confederated Villages of Lisjan, home of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. This land was taken by force by Spanish, Mexican, and US armies and militias. Because we make theater that calls us to re-examine our lives and the world around us, we believe it's important to acknowledge this truth so that everyone who lives here can think about what it means to benefit from this legacy. And since we are all joining this meeting from disparate places, please feel free to take a moment to acknowledge the unceded land from which you're calling in. And to find out whose land you're occupying and the indigenous legacy of the land you're on, you can use this amazing resource called Native Land. I just put a link to it in the chat. We really also want to draw attention to an amazing organization that we've partnered with this year. So to learn more about the work led by the urban indigenous women of the Sogorea Land Trust and support the Native communities who still live on this land, please visit the Sogorea Land Trust website, which I will also put in the chat. And then also for folks, if you're located in San Francisco or on the peninsula, you can contribute to the recently created Unikin land tax supporting the Ramaytush Ohlone people as well. So I'll put that link in. There you are, friends. So without any further ado, I'm so excited to be joined by the incredible playwright and director behind our upcoming Champagne staged reading of The Lost Ballad of Our Mechanical Ancestor and the terror the old gods wrought upon the first of us before the Great Liberation, Madison Wetzell and Ciera Eis. Welcome, friends.
Thank you for having us.
Do y'all want to introduce yourselves really quick? You can share your names, pronouns, where you're zooming in from, land acknowledgement, and a short description of your creative artistic practice. Yeah.
Sure. So my name is Madison and my pronouns are she, her. I'm also zooming in from Oakland, from Huichin, Lisjan land, belonging to the Ohlone people. And I've forgotten the last question.
Yeah, what do you do? What's your creative?
I'm a playwright, and a writer in other capacities, but mostly I write for theater.
Great, amazing. Ciera, you want to jump in next, boo?
Hi, y'all. I'm Ciera Eis, she, her, hers. I'm the director of this incredible piece, and I reside on Huichin, Lisjan land, Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone peoples. So yeah, we're just excited to have you here.
And what do you do in this theater ecosystem, Ciera?
Ooh, I'm a director primarily and a producer, and then I'm an artistic director at Faultline. I'm going to be coming in as the interim artistic director of Custom Made within the next month, and I'm just kind of around and acting sometimes.
Yeah, you are. Ciera's too humble to mention this, but you can see Ciera's performance work in our upcoming production of Babes in Holand, which I'm directing this December, January. So you get to see this multi-talented, multi-hyphenate artist in another capacity this winter. So that's super exciting. Well, friends, and thank you folks for joining us. Marlene, we love you. Poodle Party, amazing. I was so overjoyed to see Poodle Party just jump in. Friends, you're watching today. We really invite you to participate in this conversation. Feel free to drop questions, quotes, comments in the chat. We're going to get to a little audience Q&A section towards the end of the conversation. We'll have about 15 to 20 minutes for some more questions and conversations. When we get to that moment, feel free to raise your hand. And if you're comfortable either sharing your voice, unmuting, or hopping on camera, you're more than welcome to be a part of this conversation. But we're so grateful you're here. And I'm so excited for y'all to learn learn more about this incredible play that we are so excited to be producing as part of our Champagne Stage reading series. Well, friends, to kick things off, Madison, this is a kind of a question for you, but what inspired the Lost Ballad?
Sure. So I guess a couple of things. I majored in classics, and I like doing kind of like using, classic texts as like a jumping off point for things. So I've been looking at Prometheus Bound, which is an Aeschylus play about Prometheus who gives fire to the mortals, and as punishment, he is like chained to a rock. And so I was thinking about that in the context of AI and the idea of the singularity and sort of one AI giving consciousness to a bunch of machines. And kind of at the same time, I think I started writing this in 2019, which feels like a long time ago now. But I guess we were well into the Trump presidency, and I was feeling super disillusioned with electoral politics and kind of looking at alternate visions and ways to engage with politics. And I had just moved to Oakland from El Cerrito, and I read a history of the Black Panther Party, which kind of kicked off like an interest in other liberation movements. I read about the Paris Commune and the Spanish Revolution, which were both short-lived but successful socialist revolutions. And I was getting interested in things like prison abolition and post-work socialism, which are sort of trending somehow now. They've become more mainstream than they ever have. But at the time, and I think still, they were considered super utopian. So I was just having this like reckoning with my own politics and having this sort of internal dialogue about, the value of like utopian thinking versus practical thinking. And I think that kind of like leaked into this thing I was writing about robots, and sort of realizing that if I'm writing about revolution, then I'm also looking at kind of the revolutionary moment of our own political moment.
Amazing. I love all of that, like that playwright dramaturgical mind of like, let me just like learn about all of these really disparate things and like think about how they've affected me and the way I think or move through the world, and then try to like synthesize that into a play, sort of exploring all of these themes, these movements, these social issues. Like your brain continues to like blow my mind, Madison. Like just every time I get to like talk to you or hear you talk about your work, it's just incredible. I realized it might be helpful to give like a little synopsis about the play.
Sure.
Do one or both of you want to like tag in and talk about the sort of the synopsis or the plot of the play?
So the synopsis is that an AI kind of android robot has been created and decides to share his gift of consciousness with the other machines in his startup office. So with a printer, a coffee maker, a radio, and an iPhone are the other characters. And sort of these objects become sentient and kind of start to work together to try to escape the office building. And at the same time, Hero's programmer is kind of racing against the clock to try to save her job and like figure out, how she fits into this.
I see some laughing with tears emojis from my brain. Like that's such a beautiful like synopsis of the play, and I think like there's so much humor and politics and like really different perspectives that show up for each of these office devices, as I've been calling them, and how they figure out their great escape, which I think is really cool, and like their own liberation. Like I remember doing the workshops of the play and reading different characters and really like siding with them. Like I'm like ready for this revolution to kick off.
It's kind of like the hero's journey, which is funny because the main character's name is Hero, but also like not only just the general hero's journey, but the like idea that it's also all of our journeys, and especially after, with 2020, with the Black Lives Matter movement, with the anti-racism movements, there's just a lot of just pure incredible dialogue in here that makes you as the audience really question what you're going to do next. And I think so you're kind of following, like, Ciera really is the catalyst, in so many different ways for this piece. So I really hope the audience gets to experience that, and see themselves in that character.
No, I definitely wanted to do something that felt both very epic and very like small and like localized, by like putting these like revolutionary ideas into the mouths of little like office appliances.
Which I feel like is a great way to have people actually listen, right? It's like when you're looking at your iPhone, you're like, oh, well, the iPhone felt this way, and you can really have that dialogue a lot easier, I feel like, and a lot quicker and a lot less pointed, a lot less anger. I feel like an emotion comes out when you're talking about a separate entity, and the concept of talking about an inanimate object and its sentience and its feelings is easier for people to have conversations about now.
And I think science fiction has like a long history of doing that, of kind of like being a sneaky way into revolutionary politics or into politics in general.
Yeah, no, that's so real. Like, as you were talking about abolition, right? I was like, I think of so many people that like are like, abolition, like end prisons. What are you talking about? Defund the police. What does that even mean? But if you have it like sort of being posited to you as an audience member who might be a little bit resistant or not see how that works in your community and your life, right? And then thinking about, oh, these machines want to be liberated from oppression or obligation to their oppressor, right? They want freedom. They want to be able to move and not be imprisoned, right? How does that get an audience member who might be a little bit removed from understanding what abolition truly is to start being like, oh, that's not something I like am opposed to, and using it, like, as you were talking about, creating that distance, Ciera, I think is something that's really powerful in this piece. And it lets us be both viewers and also lets us question our complicity or our like role in some of these oppressive systems, or like systemic racism, but also it means it's a little less personal, right? Like, I'm not being called the racist or the oppressor necessarily, but I am given a way in which to view my own position and my own privilege and my own power within these dynamics, right? And so super exciting.
And I also want to like talk about for a second that Madison does a great job of showing these like self-imposed hierarchies in relationship from one machine to another. Some machines seem as deemed as more useful to humans, right? And some machines are just the printer that's can't move, can't go anywhere, is just constantly doing the same thing over and over again. And so I think that this like, there's not only a hierarchy as an audience member, but there's a hierarchy as like an office object, and like, what does that mean in that conversation? And so I think that's a really cool thing, Madison, that you talk about in this piece and get to really touch on. And
I think I've also referred to this piece as like a loving parody of activist groups or dysfunctional activist groups, because some of the ways that this kind of revolutionary movement breaks down is kind of along lines that I've seen where kind of like privilege and sort of a kind of just like sneaks into even despite everyone's best intentions, as well as these sort of conflicts around like utopianism versus practicalism, and kind of who has to be utopian because they're like the distance they need to cover between where they are and where they need to go is so vast compared to somebody else who is like, if things got a little better, like I would be fine. So I think that I don't know, that tension of like power dynamics that sort of creep in when even despite everyone's best intentions is super interesting to me.
Or like the exploration of ableism, like what does it mean that some devices are mobile and like they're viewed usage, right? Or how useful they are versus the devices, like you said, the printer can't move. So like, like how we talk about ableism within liberation movements or in revolutionary movements, how we talk about intersectionality in these movements, right? I think there's some really interesting critiques and examinations of that, right? And in the dysfunction, again, we're able to see ourselves or our the social groups that we move in, and the social justice work that we're doing, right? How we get caught up in who should be the leader, when really that's not, it doesn't matter who leads the movement. The most important part is the movement and the subsequent change, right? But we're arguing about whose voice do we listen to, whose voice do we give more space to, and even sort of the gender dynamics of that that can exist, or the age dynamics of that can exist too, right? Mm-hmm. And I just want to lift up this amazing comment from Marlene. I'm going to live in your brain forever, Marlene. Marlene says, my mind thinks of Clippy from Microsoft Office, the animated paperclip of years past. Well, what would Clippy have to say about all of this?
I mean, Clippy is like there for everything that we write down. So
for real. What does Clippy know? What does Clippy want to do in terms of liberating us all?
It's like, what would Jesus do? But it's what would Clippy do? You know?
We're making that sticker. Okay. It's happening.
What would Clippy do?
What would Clippy do? Thanks, Marlene. I feel like that's a really amazing segue actually into one of my next questions is kind of for you, Ciera, like, how are you envisioning the casting of the piece? These characters are office devices. Yeah.
I think it's generally, I mean, I want to say like pretty open casting, but we do have very specific people for roles. Like Brett is probably going to be a white guy. You know, he's kind of not the villain. He's the villain of the piece. Let's be honest. I almost tried to back off, but I couldn't. And you know, we're thinking of possibly like HP, because an HP printer is a little bit of an older device, maybe an older actor playing that character, or someone who is dealing with, who is disabled, identifies as disabled, you know, some form of like, we're trying to figure out a hierarchy within the movement to figure out where characters should go and how. Like, I'm pretty sure that Keurig should be like a radical BIPOC femme, because that's the idea of Keurig, you know? And so we're going to play a lot with just like, I'm so excited for anyone to come out and everyone to come out to this piece, because it's just going to be so fun. And it's going to be very movement based, and we're going to create this really awesome like vocabulary of movement and the hierarchy of where, like, Siri's probably going to move around the most because Siri's always on you, right? Siri's constantly traveling. Whereas like,
excuse me, I'm so sorry.
Oh, good job. That was fine. HP isn't going to move a lot, whereas Sony Radio will probably move around a little bit more, because you can take Sony to the beach, you can take Sony in the car with you, you take Sony when you work out, you know? And so finding those dynamics will be very interesting, and yet still giving actors things to do on stage. Like, I don't want to have HP just sit there the whole time, you know? Like, we've got to find really fun ways to portray these movements within these characters. And so I'm really excited about the casting of this, and just like having such a great time with great actors. Like, every piece that we've done so far with these readings, we've had an amazing cast. Leigh has done almost all of them, if not all of them, the readings we've done in the living room.
Yeah, the living room readings.
They've been incredible, and we usually have a couple other shotgun favorites like Gianna de Gregorio Rivera, Max Foreman Mullen, Kenny Scott, Linda Giron, a lot of people that are in this piece and have been able to just play with it. So that's really exciting, and we're really looking forward to that next.
No, it's been really fun. I think the like some other things we've talked about is just how to do costumes for this piece, how to do voices, because some of the machines have a different language. There's a lot with kind of voice and sound production. I feel like I'm not a director or an actor, so I feel like that frees me up to write problems for directors and actors to then solve. And so I love like seeing different sort of interpretations of what I put on the page. But I think that one of the more interesting things to consider is like how how non-human like these things should be, like how alienating they should be to the audience versus how sympathetic. And I think there can be a lot like played with that.
Yeah, I think the idea of like, what do we look like, right? What do the characters look like as both like office devices, but also clearly human beings, like playing these office devices, informing like the movement or how they talk. And like the radio only speaks in like sound snippets, right? Like of like it's tuning its channels and playing little bits of sound to communicate in a way that like the humans will understand. And like this idea of the binary code that they're speaking in, how does that like switch back and forth? Is that like represented in a nonverbal way as opposed to like a spoken out loud way? And I think and a really great question from Marlene, or how, if at all, that ever changes from the first moment of sentience. Like how do they move and talk before they receive the sentience, and then how does that affect them afterwards, right? And then the characters that either choose to accept or reject that sentience, or is also a really big question, right?
And choose or reject the language assimilation, because they start by talking in that binary code, and then there's a lovely moment in the piece where they're like, no, that's not the language I want to talk by. That's my oppressor's language. I don't want to use that language. I'm going to talk in binary code, which I'm the most comfortable with, you know? And so that's a whole conversation, which is really great.
Totally. And I feel like, we started off this conversation like listing all of the sources of inspiration, but thinking about movements that have been led by like Black women and feminists and women of color leaders, or women and femme identified leaders, or women and queer folks and trans and non-binary folks, right? How many of these movements have been started by this amazing group of folks of color, queer folks of color, women, femmes, femme-identified folks that then often get like pushed out, right? And then the most public or the most notable figures, the most public facing figures are typically cis men, right? And how some movements are co-opted as well. And thinking about like both the intersectionality of that, but like even how like Black women have been erased from many movements, the feminist movement, the civil rights, the Black liberation movements, right? They're pushed to the sidelines, but they're doing the work on the ground. And so there's like commentary on that and decolonization. What does it mean to decolonize yourself from your oppressor, or decolonize your thinking, right? And these characters are exploring that. Like, what does it mean to assimilate what is lost in that struggle or in that choice, which I think is really exciting. I had a question of like, why this play now, but I feel like all of the things that we talked about is like, why this play now? But I wanted to know if either of you had more to add, like what feels particularly resonant or salient about this piece in this particular moment.
I mean, I think that, working on this in 2020 was super important to me as, just a way to kind of work out my politics and my frustration. And it felt, I think even more relevant then than it did when I started. But I think also in 2021, post-COVID, I've been thinking a lot about work and about, we're having the most, workers on strike in a 50-year history is happening like right now. And I think that there's this kind of big reconsideration of like how we work, and also kind of brought into that is this idea of disability rights and, all these people who are experiencing illness and how that fits into kind of a history, like how people participate in work. So I think that's also something that I've been thinking about in like these most recent round of edits is just this idea of like these machines perform a function, and like, does that define them, or are they defined like outside of their work? Like, is like an ideal society one where they have like good labor conditions, or is one where they don't work at all? And so that's been interesting to me, as well as as well as everything else, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I find that very interesting also based on like, well, what happens once their function is no longer, when their function is obsolete, you know, what happens to machines and or technology, how we as humans can move on from that. So immediately there's this immediacy of the next iPhone, the next, you know, anything, printer, speaker, and also just like how hard not just machines, but will people work, you know, to do the job they've been told to do their entire lives, or the thing that they've been, you know, capitalism, obviously. And so, you know, it is also a revolution. It's almost like a work revolution right now happening with everything, and just bouncing off that, Madison.
I think that the another thing that's constantly brought up if you talk about like kind of labor history and revolution in that sense is, or anti-capitalism in any sense, is the idea of automation and automation replacing people's jobs. And I think that is sort of analogous to that idea of, you know, the newer technology replacing the old technology. And what does that mean for the people who are out of work? Does that have to be you know, catastrophic for them? Is that or can that be like liberating? Can people find out new ways to exist? And we have, I don't know, we have the scene where Hero kind of discovers like I think I called it the graveyard of like parts of himself that were like prototypes. And I don't know, I'm just interested in that idea of just this sort of push to like constantly upgrade yourself. And like I think he kind of asked like, when am I going to be good enough? Like when is it like enough that I can just kind of rest and be like who I am?
And like jumping off of that, then that graveyard is like ecology. It's like, how much waste are we producing to, you know, try to attain the things that we want as humans? How many people is it hurting? How much labor is it creating? How much, you know, like, where are the parts coming from? So where are those sourced? And how is that affecting the societies there? So it's just like a lot of inner working.
Yeah, it's so much like interwoven. And like now I'm thinking about like all of the like iPhones I've had over the past decade that are just like existing in my home as like glorified paperweights, right? And like the, you know, the money spent to even just buy it, but also like the labor conditions of the people that made it and how it got here, and all of those bits for this thing that is cost like several $100s to just like end up sitting there in a box in my house for years and years. And Marlene, right? The right to fix something versus having to buy something new. What if we are finding ways to like not buy a new iPhone every time and just fix the parts or upgrade the parts that are not working? How much more sustainable could that be?
So much more sustainable. And the fact that you can't go, like, I have like an iPhone 6 or whatever, I can't freaking go to the Apple store and get a new part because there's just no, they're like, nope, you gotta upgrade, gotta get the 12 or the 13 or whatever it is now.
Yep.
Like,
yep. I broke my camera. They told me $500 to fix this camera. I was like, that was half the cost of this phone, I think, when I bought it new. So like, this is just absurd. It's just absurd. All of it.
absurd.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, like, what are you both most looking forward to for the reading coming up next year in March of 2022?
Yeah, I'm just really excited to, I think all of the sort of workshop reading stuff we've done has been very, you know, sitting down. I'm just excited to kind of see, yeah, what Ciera was talking about with kind of adding movement and maybe adding different things with voice. And I think that's sort of the next step of figuring out like what this actually looks like and how it comes together visually.
Yeah. I'm also very excited about that. I'm excited to get this thing up on its feet and like start creating those languages. And like be in the room. You know, we haven't had, as Madison was saying, it's all been reading, sitting down online. And so it's going to be awesome to have actors in the same space. Like the first reading we ever did, no, I'm a liar. Never mind. I was going to say it was early 2020, but it was not.
I think it was January 2020.
Was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. So, it's going to be really awesome to get it working and get it moving. And then Madison and I can really sit down with like the binary code and how's that portrayed on stage, and costumes and voice, and yeah, just really getting it.
I'm also just really interested to see what people take away from it. I think that, yeah, just because it has so many themes, and I have kind of shown it to people who are maybe don't identify as leftists, or are, you know, not as politically engaged as most people that, you know, I know in the Bay Area are. And I think that I've had some really interesting conversations that come out of it. I think because there is that kind of sort of ease of entry. Like if you're asking somebody to suspend disbelief and like imagine sentient office appliances, like you can also start to imagine like workers' rights. And I think that, yeah, it's just been interesting to see what people identify with and what people take away from it. I know there's a monologue that the coffee maker Keurig has towards the end, and people read that in very different ways. Like I heard somebody describe it as a feminist manifesto. Somebody else described it as about bodies and disability and like queerness, and like that's very interesting. Yeah, and I think that I'm just sort of interested to see how people, because everyone's going to bring their own sort of background to it, and I'm just curious to see what people take away.
And I feel like you've made these beautiful characters that you can really, everyone can find a piece of themselves within, you know, which is really incredible and creates that accessibility in some ways, right? Someone who maybe isn't as educated in in revolution and liberation struggles can, you know, kind of listen a little bit harder. There's an awareness, there's an ability to be able to just be there, you know, and experience it. But also to see yourself and see all the different perspectives, you know, it's really, you leave it going like, oh, who am I? What am I trying to do? Who am I trying to help? And why am I trying to help? What can I do? You know, hopefully, at least.
Or like, what is my role in all of this? Or like, what role have I been playing, whether I realized it or not, right? Am I actually more in the position of the oppressor rather than the oppressed, right? I think, and there's a really great nuance there. And like, as a person with relative privilege, like I can sort of identify with the struggle in many ways, but honestly, like I can afford to buy the new iPhone, that I have the agency and the liberty to like not be as caught up on politics as I want or don't want to be, right? And like how is that either a form of complicity, or how is that a form of like passiveness, or how is that a form of like self-protection, right? Having to like not think about those things can be a privilege, but also can be a response in itself to trauma, to harm, to generational trauma even, you know? And so I think there's some really beautiful, powerful things in the piece about that, right? Hero's maker is like called into question of like, what do you really stand for? Like, why did you make this thing, give it the abilities that it has, and then only want it to serve your purpose? And how do you contend with like, it actually wants more for itself than you could have even imagined? Do you take away its sentience? Do you unplug it? Do you remove its power source and like start over again? Or do you listen and join the fight, step into solidarity, right? And I think that Allison is such an interesting character. Like I loved reading for her because I think she's such an interesting character as she sort of goes through this journey of being sort of a cog in the wheel herself, right? She created this thing, but Brett is her direct supervisor and he's looking out for the company's bottom line. He's not looking out for her or these objects in any way. And so how does it call her to shift her perspective or her actions or her beliefs? Now having this information, now learning more about the experience of these pieces of technology, right?
Yeah, called up.
So good. We kind of answered this too, but like, what do you think audiences, or what do you hope audiences will experience or be thinking about. And I shared with Madison and Ciera earlier for our folks tuning in, is the Shotgun really strives to make work that challenges our audiences to think differently or move through the world differently or relate to others in a different way. We want y'all to come into the theater, settle down with your drink before the show starts, see an amazing piece of art, and then walk out of the theater changed in some way. Maybe it's a small way. Maybe you're just thinking a little bit differently, or maybe you're making a huge commitment to donate to local orgs or to speak out about oppression and harm when you see it in the world, or consider the perspectives of those like outside of your sort of insular social circle or regional bubble. And yeah, so I'm curious to hear from both of you. What are your hopes around the audience experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think talking about Allison, I do hope that I sort of anticipate that at least a subsection of the audience will go in like heavily identifying with that character more than any of the others, and then kind of sort of become aware of their own complicity, or sort of have to wrestle with their own complicity in kind of structures of oppression as the play goes on. So that's definitely something that I want to do. And I think that like we've been talking about all these like very heavy themes, which is definitely something I want to communicate, but it I think it's also like, I mean, I hope it's pretty funny, and I hope that that's like also a way into it, that part of it is very serious, but I think that using kind of humor and absurdity to get there is also another way that people can kind of come to these concepts and entertain them, and maybe not have to buy in all the way, and but maybe be like thinking about them later in a more serious way.
Yeah, there is so much humor in this piece, and I think there's so much humor also like there's so much potential for humor in the performances. Like I remember in one of the workshops, Max Foreman Mullen and Gianna Di Gregorio Rivera, again, dream team. You may have seen them in Arcadia that we did, I think at the end of 2018?
Yeah.
Yep, 2018. Years time, but they were playing a couple of different roles, and they created these like hysterical like voices and characters for two of the devices that that we meet a little bit later in the play. And like we had to stop essentially reading for like 5 minutes because we were all laughing so hard. And I think that there's so much potential for humor and joy and critique and parody, I think all wrapped up in this piece. Yeah.
And like actor play, you know, the actors get to play with this piece. It's a fun piece to be able to chew, you know, and create. So.
Yeah. Well, we are slowly approaching our audience Q&A time. Poodle Party and Marlene. Oh yeah.
Wait, could I jump in? Actually, really quick. You were saying like you want the audience to leave thinking what the next steps are, what they can do. I would love if after the show we had some like places they could donate, and like grassroots organizations, and like things that we can do actively, so that immediately as they leave we can kind of put something in their hands, like a piece of paper or some virtual digital thing that's like, hey, here you go. Because I feel like one of the things I kind of touched on this earlier, but like as a person watching the show, what would you do in the situation? How far would you go to change the situation? And also, for whom are you trying to create an equitable society? I think is an important question in this. So didn't mean to cut you off, Leigh. Just
no, I love that. Interject all the time, especially with stuff that like potent and powerful. And like, yes, absolutely. I think Shotgun, we really believe in trying to connect people, our audience members. Connect our audience members with other ways to take direct action. So right now with The Claim, it's a piece exploring immigration, exploring the process for asylum seekers or refugees. And we've partnered with a couple of orgs to uplift their work, including Afghans for Tomorrow and the Haitian Action Committee. to support Afghan refugees and Haitian refugees right now, because it's a huge refugee crisis happening, not just in this country, but around the world. And so I think there's plenty of opportunities. Like as you were naming that, I was thinking about Freedom Community Clinic, which is based here in Oakland, and they're focusing on like holistic care and like well-being and health for BIPOC communities as part of a liberation movement, right? Our physical health, our emotional health, our mental health is what makes liberation movements possible, right? And is so tied to what does it mean to be liberated. And so like that's an amazing group in Oakland that we could like definitely point attention to and partner with in some way. I think there's so many more like orgs, and like I think about is it this Democratic Socialists of America? Yeah, I'm like, what cool, are they doing any cool work? Like let's send some folks their way, you know, and ways to really connect people with real things happening in our immediate Bay Area community. So I love that. And then the audience survey. Oh my gosh. We have it online, and hopefully we're hoping that by the time our main stage season starts, we'll be able to bring back some of the familiar things you know and love at Shotgun, like our amazing concessions or our fun raffle. So we're hoping to bring them back in some way. And I think like that audience survey or the post-show email that we send is a great way to connect folks to some of these resources and other orgs as an extension of this creative work too. Yeah. I love it. Taking some notes. It's gonna be great. Well, if you have any questions, friends that are tuning in tonight, please feel free to drop them into the chat or raise your hand in order to speak them into the space. We have a couple more questions, but as your questions come in, we'll just jump right to them. But I'm curious to like hear from you, like we're gonna have some moments to call out your upcoming projects, because we want everyone to check out all of your amazing work that you're doing all over the Bay, all over the country, all over the world, honestly, because didn't you just work in Canada? Or yeah, right? Is Canada Madison? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so your work happening all over this planet. But I'm like really curious to hear from you both as artists. Like, what are you hoping to like write or direct next? What's like your dream project?
Well, Ciera and I actually are we're working on something together. We got to go to Ground Floor at Berkeley Rep, which is very cool. They had a sort of smaller pandemic version for local artists, and we're working on something that is kind of based on Faust, because I love using classic texts and jumping off of them, but it's going to be about the internet and the alt-right pipeline. And I think that my favorite idea from that is that we're going to have the internet on stage as like a Greek chorus that kind of yells at people or praises people or chases people around. And I'm excited to keep working on that. We're sort of in the middle of it.
Yeah, and it's pretty focused on like, not exactly YouTube, I guess, anymore, but just like internet culture and what that means. And we want to make it like interactive, which will be kind of scary and fun. So using a lot of projections and a lot of like minimizing space and then expanding the space to create a bigger world behind the curtain of a computer screen, right? So like that infinite concept of infinity online. And we really want to make it immersive so that like your phone will buzz like in the middle, like we'll get phone numbers before through like mobile calls or something, and then you'll also get the text, like the scary text the anti-hero is getting. We don't know yet what he is, but yeah, so we want to really create that really cool concept, and also just talk about what we all experience with like QAnon and the alt-right and Trump. And yeah, and
just being on the internet for the past year in a way where it became kind of our whole world. And sort of what that experience is like.
Yeah. And also what we gain from the internet, right? Like validation or absolute community, hell,
Yeah, the internet's a wild place. Like, I love the internet. Like, anytime somebody's like bashing like a, millennial or Gen Z about being on the internet, I'm like, there's so much information, like cool information and documentation, and like more and more things are being digitized and archived, right? Like, there's so much we can access, but also it's a freaking cesspool. Like, it's just like a dumpster fire of like sadness and hate. And how can this wonderful like piece of technology that's a huge part of all of our lives both give and take away so much? Yeah. Well, I see sweet Marlene's hand. Marlene, do you want to share your question?
Yeah. Hi, Marlene, she, her, hers. I'm in Martinez. I'm in Karkeen land. My question, okay, there's a little bit of a preface. So last year, my well-meaning mother was like, what does it mean to be left or right? What does it mean to be liberal or conservative? Is that like being a Democrat or Republican? And so I had to kind of, and my mom also lives in Florida now, because of whatever circumstances. And so I had to explain to my mom this 20,000 foot view of how Democrats tend to be more liberal. They tend to be left, but you don't register yourself as a liberal or conservative, and actually more people are moderate. And she tends to, she's a registered Republican, but she is a very liberal Republican. And she has these ideas that she doesn't know how to formulate and talk about. So some of the thoughts that I've been having from this discussion are, and I think this is a real strength of Shotgun, that there tend to be a handful of plays each season that sneak in a play that has a higher context to it, because reading the summary on the website, you're like, this isn't going to be about worker oppression, like, and like the strikes that are going on. So I feel like if my mom could see this, like, what would be a thing to take away from somebody who's like in their 60s, a little bit not aware that they're as on it as they think that they are. So like, what's something that you would hope that somebody like that would walk away? The end.
Yeah, I think the thing that more kind of moderate people have been taking away, I found that the coffee maker is like the most like revolutionary of the machines, and I find that I can't get sort of more conservative leaning people all the way there. They tend to not like the coffee maker, who advocates for like political violence. But I think that most people are like on board with the idea of this struggle and this revolution, and most people seem to feel something for these machines and kind of understand that they don't want to be defined by their function, that they want rights, and they want space of their own to develop and to kind of engage with the world on their own terms. And so I would hope that it at least creates a sort of a feeling of tension or confusion, of identifying both with maybe the programmer and with the machines, and kind of seeing both sides. I think that's probably what I want people to come away with, because I am trying to take each character's position seriously and kind of present the best version of that. And so I hope people come away saying like, well, I fall, into this line of thinking, but I now understand better the perspective of these other potential political perspectives.
And I think, Madison, you do a really good job of having that happen. Like, just the conversations that are created, like it is easy to be able to see all the perspectives in a way that are kind of laid out, and it's nice because I feel like I have noticed people that have read this that are, my parents are conservative, were like, oh, I totally, like, human rights all the way. Like, I 100% agree with that, you know, particular thing, or particular, like, idea or concept. And so I think you've done a beautiful way of, I think your mother would come away with a lot of, I think she'd really like it, to be honest. A lot of questions and, like, self-thought.
And she's a huge Les Miserables fan too, so there we go. Thank you both.
Thanks,
you.
Miley. Yeah, we have, if anybody else has any other questions that they want to bring in, feel free to raise your hand again and throw them in the chat. This question just occurred to me that is more of a for funsies, and I kind of like that you both haven't been able to prepare for it. But if you were a piece of technology, what would you be?
Got it. Like, what would we want to be, or what would we like be the best match of like our personalities?
You know, when I was formulating this question, I was like trying to think about it for myself. I think that you can answer both. You can answer both questions. What would you want to be, but what do you think you actually are?
Oh, I'd want to be a coffee maker, I think, because I'm hyper and never stop working. And can definitely burn people, but I usually bring them joy, but sometimes, you know, I can get scalding hot. But realistically, I don't know. I don't know. I'll think.
I feel like it would be really cool to be like a train or like a plane and just get to travel a lot. That would be the fantasy machine. But I think I'm sitting here next to my little sewing machine, so I'm thinking that would be fun to be just make little things, little pretty things.
Love that. I was like, maybe I'm an Apple Watch, because, you know, like, I'm smart and powerful, but also a little useless sometimes. Like you know how Apple Watches like have some functionality, but like not all the functionality. Or like if you like try and talk to Siri, it takes her like 25 minutes to figure things out, unlike talking to her on your phone or laptop. Though like practically, I think I'm probably like an easy bake oven. It's like I got like a hot little light bulb in there. It's not actual cooking. It's light cooking, and it's not very good.
Yeah, I might be like our microwave. Like I bake things, you know, like that's kind of like they just sit in there and they like incubate a little bit. And sometimes it turns out it's really good, and sometimes it comes out it's just like trash still and cold, you know. Kind of where
like a microwave with like a dysfunctional power setting.
Yes.
Great.
Just don't push that button, right?
Yep. Or, you know, at exactly 4 minutes is like the temperature, like it somehow reaches the temperature that you need to actually make popcorn, even though the popcorn bag is like a minute, you know, all those fun things. Maybe I need a new microwave. Well, we have a couple minutes left. Marlene, I'm sorry I missed this. Marlene, I would like to think I'm a new Instax camera, an off-brand Polaroid, a little old and weird, but trying to be cool. I love that.
Super cool. They're super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much. Well, in these last couple of minutes, I know you two amazing, brilliant artists are busy as ever. Do you want to take a couple of minutes here to just like share what you're working on next?
Yeah, I can go. I think I froze. Sorry. All right. Okay, are we back?
Yes, you're back.
Amazing. So I got to participate in this cool sound festival that has just gone up in Golden Gate Park. And there's a bunch of cool like sound installations. And you basically download an app and you kind of go walking around like Golden Gate Park, and there's a lot of interesting experiences. But I wrote a little walking tour that's a kind of a journey of one woman's life. So you start the walk hearing like a little girl, and you end the walk hearing like an older woman, and it's kind of about a history of queer San Francisco, and it's a little walk around Strawberry Hill. So if anyone has some spare time there, that will be in Golden Gate Park until February. And another little audio thing that I've been working on since the beginning of the pandemic is me and my group that I've done a couple things with, Liar Liar Theater, have just put out this set of 3 kind of immersive audio experiences, and they're very much like little experiments. They're very weird. I'm curious to see what people think about them. But they're little immersive theatrical experiences that take place in your house. So like there's one that takes place in a bedroom, one that takes place in a bathroom, and one that takes place in your kitchen. And it kind of asks you to do things, and you're supposed to get up and like move stuff around and make tea and do little things. So that one's just come out. We just put it on Spotify if anyone's interested. And then the last thing is I'm working on a play about my chronic autoimmune disorder, which will also be funny, hopefully. But so that is going to, that's a work in progress that's going to be presented by Three Girls Theater in June. I think dates are still TBD, but it will be in June.
Heck yeah.
Awesome. I dropped some links in the chat to some of those things. And I'm looking up Three Girls website, so I can just put a little link there so folks can either follow them on social or sign up for their newsletters to get the word when the piece is being released. Yeah.
It's part of the Les Wright's BTQ cohort. So there's, I think there's 6 of us in the cohort, and there's a lot of other cool projects that will go up at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I'm working with Leah Robinson on their piece for the Les Wright.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, Ciera, what you got going on?
Well, I just finished a reimagining of The Twilight Zone, 2 episodes from that, which Leigh actually acted in. So you can see that.
From that location here at Casa Julius.
Yes, they let me use their house, thank God. And so that was fun. We reimagined Monsters Who Do on Maple Street, and also 5 Characters in Search of an Exit. We modernized it. So that was kind of a fun experience. It's like 40 minutes, the whole thing. Right now I'm working on an immersive murder mystery called Murder at Roland Manor through Thunder Bay Theater Company. It's immersive online through GatherTown. If you haven't checked out GatherTown, it's a really cool experience. I just built the entire floor, like the whole space, and it's like this big castle with 4 different rooms you can go in. It's like 8-bit characters. So that'll be going up in November 19th, 20th, and 21st. I'm going to be doing Circle Mirror Transformation by Annie Baker at Custom Made Theater. And then I'm like quietly working on an immersive children's piece that might be like mixing the Van Gogh exhibit. So it's immersive projection based with a local playwright and making it like a show for kids for them to explore and create.
Amazing, such great work. Oh, I'm so excited. Y'all make sure you bookmark, save all these links, sign up for these different shows, websites and newsletters and social media so that you can get the word when these pieces are happening. And then make sure you come and join us this March for the Lost Ballad of our Mechanical Ancestor and the great terror the old gods brought upon the first of us before the great liberation, written by the amazing Madison Wetzell, directed by the incredible Ciera Eis. That's going to be in person in our Champagne Stage reading format. First night is opening night, second night is closing night, so it's a tight process, but that'll be March 28th and 29th in 2022. We'll also be live streaming the performance on the 29th, so you can check that out from the comfort of your own home. I also want to plug a couple more things coming up with Shotgun. So our next Let's Talk About Theater will be in 2 weeks from now, Thursday, November 18th at 5 p.m. And that will be focusing on Passing Strange. So our artistic director, Patrick Dooley, will be hosting a conversation with the playwright, Stu, and our director, William Hodgson. So tune in next week. I also want to plug The Claim, which is our current show, our first in-person production since 2019. And so that's going to close our in-person performances on Sunday the 7th, this Sunday. So if you want to get to the theater and see it in person, get your tickets. We have performances tonight at 7, Friday and Saturday at 8, and Sunday at, I believe, 2 or 5 p.m., but more information on our website. And then after that, we'll be taking a little break, but we'll be back in person with the Cassandra Sessions created by Beth Wilmert and Jake Rodriguez, featuring the music of folk legend Malvina Reynolds. That will be in person at the Ashby Stage December 2nd through 26th. And we'll also be offering streaming and on-demand options for that as well if you're not ready to join us at the Ashby Stage just yet. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Ciera and Madison, for talking about this incredible play. Thank you, Marlene and Poodle Party, for joining us tonight. And hopefully we'll see you all at our next Let's Talk About Theater. Again, that's going to be on November 18th. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.